Hi, my name is Maren Loveland. I'm a PhD student in English and Media Studies at Vanderbilt University. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and my paper is entitled Invisible Extractions, Energy and the Politics of Seeing. On May 7th, 2021, the United States Colonial Pipeline experienced a massive ransomware attack on its central computing systems, a threat only remediated by forfeiting a steep Bitcoin payment to the responsible hacking group, DarkSide. The attack caused temporary gas shortages and price increases in the southeastern states, but more importantly, this event revealed how American energy infrastructures are utterly beholden to the threats and accompanying economies of digital warfare, which are swiftly becoming high priority national security concerns. As this example makes clear, it is no question that cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin are swiftly altering the political and physical landscapes of the United States. Across the country, private energy companies redirect their extracted energies to mine Bitcoin and other encrypted digital currencies, while the public purchases and sells ownership of these currencies in the hope of making money. As such, the creation, use, and accompanying risks of digital capital are quite literally fueled by the cultures of energy and extraction. Cryptocurrency mining particularly reveals how energy infrastructures of the 19th and 20th centuries are repurposed to perpetuate the lexicons and practices of nationalist empire building at a digital scale. This idea is exemplified in the energy infrastructures of the Pacific Northwest, especially the network of hydroelectric dams situated on the Columbia River, which were created in part to facilitate the development of interwar national security. Contemporarily, the excess energy generated from these dams is utilized by private cryptocurrency mining companies to extract and sell digital currencies in order to turn a profit. Therefore, the infrastructures designed to generate energy, mitigate geopolitical risk, and advertise the strength of democracy during World War II ironically become the same ones currently producing one of the United States' most immense, largely unregulated, and highly decentralized security risks in its history. This paper examines the cultural history of hydroelectric energy in the Pacific Northwest, especially in propaganda films and federal photography, to argue that energy extraction is an inherently colonial project operating in both public and private spheres, oscillating between visibility and invisibility, which works to protect the interests of the financial elite while heightening risks absorbed by the physical landscape and the colonized, and further extending the practice of empire via the digital economy. Before delving into an analysis of this paper's primary sources, I want to provide a brief explanation of cryptocurrency technologies so their significance in the context of this paper can be more easily understood. Cryptocurrency is a decentralized currency protected and maintained by blockchain technology, which works to encrypt the personal information of the currency's users, ensuring their privacy with the hope of eliminating the financial vulnerabilities inherent to other forms of exchange. The idea of a decentralized digital currency has been circulated since the late 1980s, originating during the crypto anarchy movement. However, it did not gain significant traction until after the market crash of September 2008. In October 2008, as desires to decrease financial risk ran high, an individual or group of individuals writing under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto published what is widely referred to as the Bitcoin White Paper. In this short paper, the unidentified authors clearly defined the technology needed to establish a digital currency. After the paper's publication, Bitcoin became more firmly established in the American cultural consciousness as a method of stabilizing currency and decreasing risk by deviating from centralized economies. With this rise in popularity, facilities dedicated to mining cryptocurrency were built across the United States. These mines are spaces where Computers are dedicated to verifying and establishing the essential encryption of cryptocurrency and is incentivized by rewarding the verifier with small amounts of Bitcoin per transaction verified. As such, the computers require significant quantities of energy to power and cool their hardware. Mines become microclimates, ironically disturbing the exterior environment while heavily regulating their own. Current Bitcoin mining practices consume more energy than all of Argentina, and this is only one of thousands of currencies currently being mined. In short, the extraction of digital currencies has tangible environmental consequences that can no longer be trivialized or ignored. While Bitcoin is currently the most widely circulated cryptocurrency, there are myriad cryptocurrency variations such as Ethereum and Litecoin, among many others. These currencies each function individually. However, the process of mining these currencies unquestionably consumes vast amounts of energy and must be analyzed within the context of other energy histories, aesthetics, and politics. The Pacific Northwest's cool climate and robust capacity for energy production makes it a hub for cryptocurrency mining. Along the Columbia River, mining facilities take advantage of the river's many dams and utilize this energy to generate digital currencies. In other words, this region notably demonstrates how public infrastructures are being expropriated by private mining companies, blurring the boundaries between conceptions of public and private capital. The first dam built along the Columbia River, Bonneville Dam, signaled the region's initiation into treating infrastructure as a means of nationalist security and strength. As the United States approached World War II, these infrastructural projects helped to eliminate the feelings of financial unpredictability and instability that defined the Great Depression, as well as establish the extractive industries of weaponry production, including aluminum for aircraft development and plutonium used in creating the atomic bomb. Additionally, the Bonneville Dam and other dams along the Columbia River advertised the advent of cheap, domestic, and centralized electricity, meant to power the homes of suburban nuclear families. The Bonneville Power Administration, or BPA, a federal agency dedicated to marketing and distributing power in the Pacific Northwest, tirelessly documented the dam's construction with photography and film and worked to capture the seemingly opposed markets of domesticity and war. As such, these cultural artifacts reveal how public works geoengineered the landscape to extract power for the preservation of domestic private worlds and the destruction of foreign ones, and in the development of hydroelectric energy. In Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism, she directly assesses this tension between private and public enterprises. Arendt asserts that the private accumulation of wealth is never truly private, because the private individual's accumulation ends at death. To defy the limitations of death, therefore, wealth needs to be invested publicly, thus continuing beyond the human lifespan and accumulating forever. Arendt explains, by transcending the limits of life in planning for an automatic, continuous growth of wealth beyond all personal needs and possibilities of consumption, individual property is made a public affair and taken out of the sphere of mere private life. The increasing value of cryptocurrency is therefore inextricably attached to the public sphere, because without it, value would be destroyed by the finiteness of life. Not only do private companies mine cryptocurrency to receive public investment, but these companies rely on public energy infrastructures and public spaces, i.e., the landscape, to create never-ending wealth accumulation. However, Arendt troubles this notion of perpetual and infinite accumulation, calling it a, quote, delusion, unquote, entrapping human agents in the cycle for power and wealth, leaving, quote, each person powerless, unquote, and moreover, quote, degraded into a cog in the power accumulating machine, unquote. A machine destined to completely deplete the world of its resources and life. According to Arendt, then, the political intersection of the public and private is inherently entangled with power. In the case of cryptocurrency production, this power is both literal and figurative. The energy from civil infrastructures powers the private accumulation of wealth until this wealth is further circulated in the public domain. As humans search for power and the endless accumulation of capital, power in all forms is utilized, manufactured, redirected, owned, and profited upon. Therefore, when private cryptocurrency mining companies appropriate public power for the generation of new capital, they simultaneously engage with an extensive history of geopolitics, war, and environmental death that is embedded in the infrastructural landscapes of extraction and energy. Arendt's argument further reveals how accumulation is in part a practice of imagination, albeit a dangerous kind of imagining. The delusion of power depends on creating a narrative of endlessness. In other words, power, money, and resources beyond limitation. The rhetoric of endlessness pervades extraction narratives, creating a sense that extraction can last forever, resulting in the unending accumulation of capital and the fiction of endlessly consuming the products of extraction. Public spaces and environments, then, are inextricably implicated in the process of accumulation, which Arendt contends will only, quote, destroy itself in order to begin anew the never-ending process of power generation, unquote. While the aging infrastructures located along the Columbia River, as well as across the United States, are no longer being used to fuel weaponry development in the same way that they did during World War II, these same energy infrastructures are being repurposed to other ends of empire building through the advent of mining digital currencies. In the early 20th century, the rampant expansion of infrastructure in the Pacific Northwest became the subject of landscape photographers and later of filmmakers. Within this visual history, infrastructural empires are simultaneously the objects of seeing and the systems of power fueling new ways of understanding domesticity, security, and risk. Within the visual archive of the Pacific Northwest infrastructural empire, the visibility of energy's production obscures the effects of this empire on the environment, the displaced indigenous tribes of the area, and geopolitical conflict. Photography of the Columbia River's infrastructures was primarily taken for practical purposes, often by project surveyors employed by the Bureau of Reclamation. However, even in these photographs, it is evident that the artists who created them perceive the electric dam as far more than an infrastructure. They treat the dam as an object of devotion, a miracle, a wonder, and above all, an unparalleled art object. Photographs of the Grand Coulee Dam, located upstream from Bonneville Dam, for example, were advertised as symbols of American political power in post-war Europe. The photographs capturing the dam's construction, moreover, expound upon narratives of endless productivity by depicting scenes of work. The human subjects surrounding the dam, like the dam itself, are never idle, but always drilling, digging, or excavating. Other photographs portraying the origins of infrastructure in the Columbia Basin situate industry within the landscape, creating a kind of landscape photography that is highly practical while still being heavily attuned to the sense of aesthetics that equates machinery with environment. The infrastructure photographs of the Columbia Basin speak to how infrastructures, which are designed to be forgotten and blend into the landscape, are highly tangible products inseparable from the collective labor of individuals. The images, perhaps above all, expertly balance the narratives of stillness and motion. While the work of the white male laborer never stops, this ceaseless action builds the immovable, unquestionably secure infrastructure of hydroelectric energy, in turn reflecting this ideological juxtaposition onto the nation itself. The BPA's 1939 film, Hydro, furthermore depicts the construction of the Bonneville Dam, and was notably distributed to audiences in China and Russia to demonstrate how infrastructures could provide immense military assets as well as domestic comforts. This film effortlessly presents scenes of women ironing, making waffles, and cooking dinner for their husbands, alongside shots of airplane production and chemical extraction. The narrator of the film explains succinctly the purpose of hydroelectric energy is to make products which, quote, build the richness of our daily lives, unquote, while also making, quote, weapons of defense to safeguard the liberty we know, unquote. Infrastructural filmmaking works to capture this uncanny proximity of domesticity and national security, equating homemaking with the expansion of empire. The private usage of electricity becomes irrevocably involved in the manufacturing of war and weaponry, as the film's narrative brings to light. Infrastructure documentaries like Hydro idealize a culture where homemaking and empire not only coexist, but add value to one another and further their goals, making them not so disparate as they might initially appear. These archives of film and photography explicitly illuminate how practices of energy extraction, however clean or innovative, are fundamentally tied to the violence of empire expansion, what Akil Mbembe identifies as, quote, infrastructural warfare, unquote. The photographs and films of infrastructure convey how energy infrastructures not only shape how humans live and fuel their communities, but also often determine how they see or understand the world, especially by preserving the images of power and dominance while erasing any evidence of pain, destruction, or failure that might put the processes of accumulation at risk. By relying on public works as energy sources, current practices of cryptocurrency mining and usage engage with infrastructural simultaneous agency and objectification, and perpetuate the cultures of selective seeing and endless consumption into the 21st century. The repurposing of hydroelectric infrastructures designed to lessen risk for the extraction of an inherently risk-filled currency illustrates how energy is at the heart of private and public processes of empire. Cryptocurrency actively works to encrypt the information of its users, creating an enhanced level of privacy for their exchanges. Though this largely unmediated and consumptive practice places public environments at risk while maximizing the ability to retain private investments and capital. As Arendt suggests, the practice of endless accumulation is one of imagination, and this is further fortified by the creation of a visual and filmic record of energy infrastructures, which works to solidify a narrative of perpetual wealth and growth. The documentary style that defines this archive further suggests a certain unequivocal level of truth to the fiction of energy. Because nonfiction photography and film attempts to present an objective perspective, the possibility of energy's unreliability or risk feels distant or even impossible. The current turn towards using and mining intangible digital currencies with visceral impacts on the environment mirrors this distance between comfortable personal accumulation and violent public consequences. Infrastructures like cryptocurrencies are at once highly visible and unignorable when they pose an apparent threat to the public, but just as easily fade into a state of looming invisibility, constantly extracting in the background, just as they were designed to. By relying on the infrastructures of the 20th century, digital mining perpetuates these narratives of ceaseless accumulation, implicating energy into the digital sprawl of warfare and empire. Thank you so much.